some housekeeping arrangements. If you wish to speak, please indicate to myself to do so. To enable your microphone, please press the middle button, which will turn green, and the microphone will light up red at the top to indicate that this has happened. Please remember to press the middle button when you have finished speaking, as it is particularly important that all members use their microphone so that the audio can be picked up through the live stream. In the event of a fire alarm sounding during the meeting, please stand up and follow the meeting administrator to the evacuation point outside of the building. Hopefully that won't happen. Firstly, do we have any apologies for absence?
We have apologies from councillors Mockball, Brereton and Wakeford, Chair.
Thank you. Moving on to item 1. Are there any members that would like to declare an interest in the relation to any items on the agenda this evening? Councillor Slade.
Same as last week. I'm on the Town Council Planning Committee.
Thank you. Right, we will move on to item number 2. And we will start with item J from our last agenda. And I'll invite Kevin Simpson to come and speak on that for us. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair, and good evening, members. So I just thought it would be beneficial to do a brief overview of the applications as a whole before I go into the individual item. So just to refresh that these items, these 14 items, were originally brought to DMC in February this year, and they were deferred at that point, waiting for further parking surveys to be carried out and consultations with the County Council Highways team and the emergency services and our operations waste services at HDC, all of which have been carried out. So across the 14 sites that we were discussing last week before we had to defer the last 5 items that we're discussing this evening, we reviewed the fact that over the 14 sites, 174 garages would be demolished, and out of those 174, 65 are occupied and only 45 are tenanted by residents of the area, as was detailed on the master plans that you saw last week. Under the proposals, 13 of the 14 sites should be redeveloped with a total of 29 affordable dwellings provided. The remaining site will be developed to provide additional visitor and allocated parking. And as you saw from the plans we reviewed last week, you could see the layout of those. 45 allocated spaces will be provided for those local residents who will no longer have a garage, and there will be 38 visitor spaces provided. In total, there will be 83 allocated or visitor spaces, and included in the 57 provided for the occupants of the new dwellings. This results in a total provision of 140 parking spaces. There were a range of objections ranging from 40 to 51 across each site. These were published and addressed in the relevant sections of the report, but they relate to various issues such as loss of privacy, loss of light, overdevelopment of the area, increased noise, impact on visual amenity, parking displacement, emergency vehicle access, and intensification of parking issues. St Neots Town Council have been reconsulted, and they maintained their objections to 13 of the sites. They supported the item which was for the remodelling of the parking area and no dwelling to be provided, which is one of the ones that we will visit this evening. As I said earlier, there are no objections from the Highways team in terms of highway safety, Cambridgeshire Fire and Rescue, Cambridgeshire Police or the East of England Ambulance Service, and no objections from the Waste Management Services. Just lastly, before I move on to the individual cases, it should point out that the surveys that were completed at various times of the day, as were required by the methodology that was used, referenced that as worst case scenario, 107 vehicles would be displaced onto the surrounding streets as a result of the development. Okay, so now I shall go on to the individual item, which was item J in the report pack from last week, and I understand is item A on this current application pack. So this was for the demolition of 19 garages 7 of which are rented locally, 1 from outside of the area, and 11 are void, and the erection of 2 two-bedroom dwellings with 2 spaces per dwelling, 2 allocated and 3 visitor spaces. So that slide you can see above you just shows the location of the site we're referring to. Next slide, please. And this is a general view of the layout of the garage site. So that's looking from within the garage courts towards the Henbrook properties at the top left. The top right, again, a view from within the site showing the Henbrook properties. The bottom left, a northeasterly view looking towards Henbrook, and then a general view of the garages and what the layout is at present. Next slide, please. Thank you. So that shows the proposed dwellings. As you can see, the layout and the elevation drawings there, and the site layout in the centre there. And I believe there was a question last week which we started to answer regarding the shared driveway, which leads down to a retained garage that is to the top left of that centre photograph you can see there, or that image you can see there. Thank you.
Thank you. There are no speakers for this particular application, so we will move on to questions of clarification to the officer. Are there any questions for clarification? Councillor Davenport-Ray.
Yes, thank you. In the residential amenity section of your report, it's 7.12, you discuss the original design and where you observed there would be significantly detrimental impact on the amenity of the adjacent dwellings. Can you tell us about how that has been mitigated in the design that's before us for consideration tonight?
Yeah, I'll just open up the report. Bear with me for a second, please. Thank you. Yes, I just wanted to refresh my memory with that one. So I think what happened with these from memory was that there was a limited degree of separation from the rear of the dwellings on Duck Lane and Henbrook. So the original plans for plot 1 reflected a separation distance of 1 metre to the boundary. So what we asked for was further separation from that rear boundary of those properties, because even though something may comply with the tests that we use to assess a planning application, and in terms of residential amenity, it may appear acceptable. In making something as ideal as we possibly can, we would look for a greater degree of separation where possible. And if something can be adjusted to retain a greater degree of residential amenity, we would request that. Thank you.
Councillor Sanderson.
Thank you, Chair. Good evening again, Kevin. I just wanted to take us to paragraph 7.27 about its neighbourhood plan. It seems to be contrary to that, but I think your argument is that the planning is acceptable. Could you expand on that slightly? I think you may have already done that on many occasions, but useful. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, so I believe one of the points raised was that policies PT1 and PT2 of the Senate's neighbourhood plan had not been given consideration. So policy PT1 deals with the demonstration of how sustainable transport modes can be maximised, whilst PT2 deals with parking provision and states that all development proposals which include residential development, must provide adequate space for vehicle parking to meet the expected needs of residents and visitors. So in this case, what I would say is the provision of cycle storage for each of the new dwellings, which will be secured by conditions, so we can deal with dimensions, etc., of the cycle storage to ensure that it provides 1 cycle space per dwelling, which is secure and covered, as per the design guide would be met. And as has been seen from the provisions provided to the new dwellings, there will be allocated spaces provided for the occupants of the new dwellings, as well as the visitor spaces and allocated spaces across the site. Thank you.
Are there any other questions of clarification for the officer? As there are no more questions, we'll move on to the debate. Is there someone that would like to start for us? Councillor Jordan.
Yes, this is the second time for me looking at it. I know for some members it's the third time, and I went to have another look again to refresh my memory given the details that we went into last week. I think it's always difficult when somebody's had something to take it away, and the parking in front of the garages, obviously residents have been used to having that. And so to take it away, I can understand that it must cause them some concern. But again, unless somebody else can point it out to me for a planning reason, I went through it and looked all over again at the sites. I can't see a planning reason to refuse this. So I'll listen to anybody else who wants to persuade, or I'll listen with respect. If anybody can come up with a planning reason, I'd like to hear it, please.
Thank you. Councillor Saunderson.
I was just going to say, I think if you want to look at 7.27, Kevin answered the question very thoroughly, but I suppose it depends on how you interpret that. For example, the neighbourhood plan policies. But it's obviously up for members to decide that, isn't it?
Councillor Gardner.
Thank you very much, Chair. Well, as the only member in this particular forum that actually sat on the neighbourhood plan preparation for the St Neots Town Council, I would say that it does comply with the St Neots Town Council's neighbourhood plan.
Thank you, Councillor Gardner. Councillor Goulson, sorry.
Thank you, Chair. I think listening to the comments made by Councillor Jordan, yes, we've gone through this, and unless someone can give me a concrete reason following our plan to come up with an alternative, I will propose this if you would like to accept my proposal.
Thank you. Councillor Gardner.
And I'm quite happy to second, Chair, if that's okay with you.
Thank you. Are there any other comments? In that case, we will go with that proposal to approve. All those that approve, can please put up your hands.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10.
All those against?
1, 2, 3.
So that has been approved. We move on to item K, which is 2B on the new agenda. And I'll introduce Kevin to introduce that for us. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chair. So yes, this is an application for the demolition of 33 garages and the erection of 3 two-bedroom dwellings with 2 spaces provided per dwelling, 5 visitor and 4 allocated spaces. Now, the figures I'm going to give you in a second won't equate to 33 garages because it is 33 that are being considered for demolition, but there are 35 in total, but 2 are being retained. There is also 1 additional garage that is outside of the red line area, as I understand it's privately owned. So out of the 33 garages, 27 of those are void, and 6 of them are rented from outside of the area. So that image you can see there is the master location plan showing the extent of the garages in the area that are due for demolition. And I can believe you can just see the one outside of the red line there at the very bottom of the plan. Okay, and the next slide, please. Okay, so this is a general view showing the arrangement of the flats and the garages, and you can see the flats to the rear, so you can see the variance of the design and character of appearance of properties in the area. The top right-hand photograph shows the view towards the Henbrook properties from within the garage sites, and another view at the bottom left from within the garage site showing the view southwest towards the properties on Henbrook. and then a wider view taken from the entrance of the garages and with the side of number 54 Henbrook visible there. Okay, so this slide shows the imagery of the proposed dwelling that you can see to the right of the block plan there. So you can see the layout and design of that property, the one that's adjacent to the flats where my colleague's pointing to there. And you can see the arrangement of the visitor and allocated spaces as well as those allocated to the dwellings. Next slide, please. And this shows the layout of the pair of semi-detached properties, which were to the left of that picture. Thank you.
There are no particular speakers for this particular item, so we will move on to questions of clarification for the officer. Are there any questions of clarification? Councillor Davenport-Ray.
Sorry, it's me again. So again, in section 7 about residential amenity, section 7.21 talks about how the gardens of these houses might be overlooked by the block of flats that's behind. And you've mentioned that given the scale and location of the windows in the block of flats, that overlooking is likely to be significant. With the current design as it is before us, do you still consider that to be the case, or have any mitigating factors been made to address that?
Thank you. So I wouldn't say that any changes have necessarily been made that mitigate those impacts, but I think again it's a balance on the approach that you take to the decision here. So we can see the extent of the flats in the area there and the scale of them. And naturally, when you've got 4 or 5-storey blocks of flats, there is going to be a degree of overlooking into surrounding properties. And again, that is an existing situation. So it's on the balance of, would you be introducing harm by introducing something that didn't already exist? And when you balance that against the provision of affordable housing, is the degree of overlooking that would arise from the occupants of the flats towards the gardens of the new dwelling significantly harmful to refuse it on that basis? Thank you.
Are there any other questions of clarification for the officer? If there are no more questions, we will move on to the debate. Who would like to start the debate on this particular application? Councillor Niche, thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I think it goes back to the previous one where Councillor Jordan also mentioned, is that I think we've gone through a lot of these and we can understand the concerns of those already parking in the areas which you could probably say they're not due to be, shouldn't be parking there, but have done because they've been allowed to park in the place is an issue. But again, I completely struggle to see any material planning reasons on this specific one and the previous ones, but we're on this specific one. And really, unless I hear something from some of the others who have got some real reasons as to why we shouldn't pass this, looking at the balance of harm, which was just mentioned there, for the for the additional 1-bed, 3-bed, sorry, and a 2-bed, I think we should. I'm happy to propose it now, but I will wait because I just would like to hear if anyone has got some real reasons as to why they might vote to not have this go through. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else? Councillor Sanderson?
I'll go back to what I said earlier about the policies in its neighbourhood plan, but I understand that members may view those differently and give different weight to those. So I can accept that members will have a different view from my own.
Thank you. Any other councillor? Councillor Niche?
At the risk of hearing anything else, I will propose that we accept this proposal. I can understand where Councillor Sanderson's coming from in a that he's read something, but actually I think it actually tells in there that they've looked at the neighbourhood plan, and actually it does afford the neighbourhood plan because it actually is providing parking space. It's not providing parking space for those that aren't actually own that land or live there. I comprehend that, but I do think it is actually doing what it's required to do in the neighbourhood plan. For elsewhere, that's not really for planning decision as to why we shouldn't approve it. Thank you. So I propose it.
Thank you, Councillor Niche. Is there anyone that would like to second that? Councillor Butler.
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, I'll happily second that. That goes along with all the other applications we've looked at. I think they've designed it fairly sympathetically, adding as many car park spaces as possible. The very large area, I've visited it a couple of times, nothing going on there. Obviously, same as always, these garages are so small now, cars getting bigger. They're of no real value, so I think it's put to a good use, so happy to second.
Thank you. So I'll take that proposal from Councillor Niche and seconded by Councillor Butler. All those that approve, can you please put up your hand?
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10.
And those that are against?
1, 2, 3.
Thank you. So that is approved. We will move on to the next item on the agenda, which is either 4L or 2C on the new agenda. And I will pass you over to our planning officer, Kevin Simpson. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. So this application relates to the demolition of 7 garages and the remodelling of the parking area. So this is the site where there isn't actually a dwelling proposed. So the listings are incorrect there. It mentions construction of one bedroom dwelling, but that's actually been deleted. So it is just providing parking. Notably, this site is the one where the Town Council have removed their objection, but it's still presented to Development Management Committee because the applications were called in. So this site will provide eight allocated parking spaces and 14 visitor spaces north of 115 Duck Lane. And that slide above showed the site within the centre of the estate, which you probably recall from the original master plan. So the top left shows the current arrangement there. The garages you can see just at the right-hand side of that photograph, and some parking taking place there at present. And then the top right shows, again, a view of the garage block that's due to be demolished. And then the general wider view of the site from the direction of Duck Lane. And the following slide shows the proposed layout of the parking area with the visitors and allocated spaces divided across the site there. Thank you.
As there are no speakers for this particular item, we will move on to questions of clarification to the officer. Are there any questions? Councillor Goulson.
Chair, just a question as on this one, when we first came through was asking for more parking spaces, and parking is something that was quite relevant. How are these parking spaces going to be allocated? We've heard visitor spaces, but you know, it's not, I'm just trying to understand how it's going to be, these are going to be allocated and maintained and all looked after.
Thank you. So yes, as I understand it, so this site is providing the 8 allocated spaces. So that will be 8 of the 45 local residents that are going to be displaced from their garages. And I seem to recall when we heard from the representative from Chorus Homes last week, the question was raised regarding how those spaces would be retained for those people. And there was the consideration they would put something in place like a rising bollard that could be locked and unlocked with a key. In order to ensure that those people had use of those spaces and they wouldn't be used elsewhere. I have to be clear that I've only taken that from what they advised us last week, though. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any other questions? Councillor Tevlin.
With regards to EV charging, sorry, could you just clarify the stance on the application for EV charging, whether there could be something put in for further down the line to include it?
Thank you. Yes, I think the issue is here we haven't got a policy in the local plan that requires people to include EV charging as part of a development. So we've got no policy position to request that people include that. Obviously, things change all the time, but at present, there's nothing we could do to enforce that.
Thank you. Councillor Niche.
I think that is a good point, and it is a difficulty because it's one I've asked for in the past, but because we haven't got a policy there, unfortunately, because they're not here, we can't actually directly ask them either. But it'd be nice if they would give consideration to it. I think it might be worthwhile in responding to them. I wonder if they could consider if there was the facility there to put some EV charging points in, but it can't be conditioned. I realise that.
We do have somebody here, so if they would want to speak, is that? Yes, you are. Yes, please.
Evening, I'm Ben Ruston from the Chorus/Places of People group. Electric vehicle charging points is now coming into building regs. It's not quite caught on this one, but we're happy to look to install them where we can. And I think the issue with things like parking courses, how do you actually get the electricity to the point where you need to come out of the ground? But we're happy to look at it, and we're doing on our new developments as well. So I think that's all I can say at the moment.
Thank you very much. Are there any other questions of clarification for the officer? I'll just bring in Clara so that she can speak.
Thank you, Chair, and through you, just on that point of EV, as the applicant has rightly touched on, building regs are moving forward in this arena, and clearly it's something we will look at as part of our next local plan. And when we do commence that, but just a point of clarification as you go into the debate, that we cannot put weight on the provision or not of EV in the context of the applications before you tonight. And for that reason, the recommendation stands as set out in the officer report. Thank you.
Thank you. So if there are no more questions for the officer, we will move on. Oh, we have a... No, we'll move on to the debate. Okay. Councillor Corney.
No, I don't want to prolong this any more than we need to, because obviously this one's been, obviously the town council have withdrawn their objection. I think this is fairly straightforward, isn't it? So happy to propose this. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Davenport-Ray.
Yes, I'd echo that, as the town council is suggesting approval, and based on what we've heard tonight, I'll second.
Thank you. Are there any other comments before I go on to the proposal? No more comments, so I will take the proposal from Councillor Corney and seconded by Councillor Davenport-Ray. All those that approve this application, please show your hand.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12.
And those that are against? Those who are abstaining? Thank you. So that has been approved. So we will move on to the next item on the agenda, which is 4M on the old agenda, and on the new agenda it is 2D. And I will pass you over to Kevin Simpson, who will present that for us. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chair. So this is for the demolition of 6 garages, of which 4 are rented locally and 2 from outside of the area, and the erection of 2 3-bedroom dwellings with 2 spaces per dwelling, 6 allocated parking spaces and 8 visitor spaces northeast of 157 Duck Lane. So that's a general overview of the location plan showing the site of the garages at present, with 157 Duck Lane to the left of that image. Next slide, please. And this is just some general views from within the garage court. So you can see at the top left, that's looking out onto Duck Lane and the entrance and the rear of number 167 visible. The general view of the garages from demolition, and just a note there that the rear of the buildings face onto the Duck Lane street scene. So you've got the concrete block rear of the garages looking out onto the road. The side of 159 Duck Lane visible from within the garage courts there. And then a view southeast showing the rear of number 157 Duck Lane. Next slide, please. And that just shows a general overview of the layout of the properties. So the elevation drawings there, and then the floor plans. And then the top right image is the block plan. So you can see the parking that's actually proposed just off Duck Lane, the 3 spaces there to the left of the houses. The entrance with the 2 dwellings on the side, and then the remaining allocated and visitor spaces to the rear down the shared driveway there at the back. Thank you.
We do have a speaker for this particular item, and she is on Zoom. So this is for Mrs. Jo Drayden.
Brennan, hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Lovely, thank you. So I live at number 157 Duck Lane, and there's a number of reasons that I wish to raise as to why myself and my neighbours feel these plans need to be rejected. So my first point is around overlooking loss of privacy, excuse me, and loss of light to myself and to my neighbours. The direction that the proposed houses are to be built from our houses to the east. We already have limited light into the back of our houses, especially during winter months, and this will be reduced further as the house to be built closest to us will block this. So it means that from my kitchen, master bedroom, bathroom and the family room where I work, these will all be affected by loss of light. The new houses will also mean we're overlooked into in our entire back garden and rear of our house. And that's if someone's looking out from the master bedroom of the new property. So we will have no privacy at all. On top of this, as you were seeing, Chorus have proposed to put 3 parking spaces onto the area at the side of our house, directly next to our wall and only feet away from our house. So this then brings me on to my second point, which is around loss of green space. The green area you'll see at the side of the property will already be reduced by half if the new houses are built. If there are now 3 parking spaces put onto the grass area too, this will reduce the green space to a tiny patch near the front of my property. I also have a number of concerns around the proposed additional 3 spaces, which brings me on to my third point. So the new houses are within very close proximity of Win Hills School. It's a very busy area at school drop-off and pick-up times, and the roads and parking area become very busy and congested. The 3 spaces proposed would mean that cars using them would have to drive across a path that has a very heavy footfall, especially around school times. The spaces are also on a long bend with reduced visibility due to my garden wall and the side of the house, and the cars that will park on the opposite side of the road as well, where these cars have to reverse or drive on and off. It will be an accident waiting to happen. We already have issues on a daily basis with cars parking on bends, on paths, stopping pushchairs and wheelchairs getting past, and people having their driveways blocked. And only last Monday, there was an accident outside Win Hills School on the busy junction. Luckily, it was only minor and no pedestrians were hurt, but it was due to a car being parked too close to the junction, leaving little room for others to get past. Have highways actually been consulted about these new 3 spaces as well, because there is no evidence that there have been. My final point is around the use of the hard standing and the impact that building these houses will have. Currently on a daily basis, there are about 20 cars using the car park without taking school traffic into account. As well as this, there are already cars filling the lay-by on Duck Lane and parking on both sides of the road. If the 20 plus cars plus the 4 garages are forced onto the roads, it'll only be a matter of time before there is an accident. There are a large number of work vans and work vehicles in the car park, which take up more than 1 parking space on the road. If there are tools in the vehicles, people don't want to park them away from home. Currently, they can reverse up to a fence or a wall to make access to the doors of the garage difficult. And whilst I agree some garage blocks are underutilised, this one isn't. If Chorus had let residents rent the 2 void garages, they would all have been occupied. We requested to rent a second garage in our block from Chorus 3 years ago. They told us there were none vacant in our block, which is obviously a lie. Another neighbour had the same experience and was put on a waiting list. So based on this information given to you, I ask you to reject the plans for the reasons of loss of privacy, loss of light, overlooking, loss of green space, parking and highway safety. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Are there any questions for this particular speaker? There are no questions. Thank you very much, Mrs. Drayden. Are there any comments by the agent? No, so we will move on to questions of clarification to the officer. Are there any questions of clarifications to our officer? Councillor Davenport-Ray.
Sorry, do we have the agent available here?
We do have
We
the
have
agent.
the applicant.
Yeah, we do have the applicant, yes.
Can I ask a question of the applicant?
Are you happy to come and, thank you.
Thank you. We have the plans before us today, which we'll be considering, but also publicly available in our planning portal are the plans that were originally submitted for this particular plot. And they differ quite significantly. In the original design, there are 2 spaces for each house with space to get in and out of the vehicle. And also, let's see, 4 allocated visitor spaces. When I look at the design that's before us for consideration today, the amount of space that was given over for 4 spaces for the houses, plus room to get in or out, has now become 6 parking spaces. And there are also an additional 3 spaces on the green space in front of the house. Can you tell us more about these changes and what led to the changes to create the design that we need to decide on today?
Sure. Just part of the design review process we've done, obviously, with consultants and the officers. We reviewed it, took on board the parking requirements and tried to optimise and improve the number of parking spaces available. All the spaces on this particular proposal are in line with the required guidelines on size. So they're all still the required dimensions.
Thank you. Councillor Niche.
Mine's just some clarifications on that we heard there about the loss of light, privacy, and whether highways were consulted. So my questions are: could you just go through the light issue, the privacy issue? Because from what I can see, it's probably not a privacy issue, although obviously anything building next door appears to be a privacy issue. And again, whether highways were actually consulted with the change, which there seems to be some concern as to whether had or hadn't been. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, so in terms of the highway matters, highways were consulted, so they've viewed the revised plans. So I think from memory, we got comments from highways on the 20th of October, and we got comments from the transport assessment team on the 27th of October. So they viewed the revised plans, which I think included the 3 additional parking spaces back in August. I think on the public access site, it shows those spaces on there. So yes, they've not raised any concerns in terms of highway safety regarding that. In terms of loss of light and loss of privacy overlooking, again, the urban design team have reviewed this site. When you look at the layout of the property, the proposed dwellings, I should say, the first floor windows are noted, but the one that would be closest to the boundary with the number 157 would be the bathroom window. So that would be obscure glazed and conditioned as obscure glazed and non-opening, as we discussed last week. There is a bedroom window, which I believe the objector was referring to, that does offer a view out from the rear of the properties. And yes, there would be a view available to the rear gardens and the rear of those properties along there. There is a degree of separation included there. And in the assessment, the urban design team noted that the relationship was similar to the properties 109 and 139 Duck Lane and 115 and 117. So it was based on the assessment that on balance, again, it was the requirement of is that significant harm in order, when you consider that that would be an oblique view and not a direct view, sort of window to window relationship, would that be overly harmful? Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any other questions? Councillor Davenport-Ray.
Yeah, just a follow-up to Councillor Nisha's question. So in the report, I read that your conclusion to that topic is that there will not be direct views. The separation distance and degree of overlooking to the rear gardens already afforded by the nature and layout of the development. This is not considered to be overly harmful. Should I interpret from that you still consider there to be harm, but that it's balanced by the other material planning considerations?
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, I would say you could say that there was a degree of harm in any development that you review. So, for example, if we were reviewing a householder extension, somebody wanting to build at 3 meters out from the back of their house at 2-story level is going to decrease the level of distance to the rear boundary and any properties behind them. So you could argue the fact that, yes, there would be an increased degree of overlooking, but it's on balance, would that be significantly harmful? And in the event of a refusal, would the inspector support that refusal on the basis of loss of privacy? Thank you.
Councillor McAdam.
On the question of parking and approval by highways, when they review this situation, do they actually go out and do a site visit, and do they look at the parking that's going on at the time? Thank you.
I can't answer that question because I don't know what their methods are of providing information on planning applications. All I can refer back to is the fact that when the Transport Assessment team reviewed it, they said that given the scale of development proposed cumulatively across the whole 14 sites of 29 dwellings, it wouldn't even trigger a requirement to provide a transport assessment, because they said that I think it was a light assessment would be required for 50 dwellings plus, and then a more in-depth one for 80 dwellings plus. So they said there wouldn't be a degree. I think the actual wording was that they came back with was, just bear with me for a moment, I'll just open it up. Here, sorry, bear with me. Oh, yes, it was here. So the Transport Assessment team would not want to comment on a development of 29 dwellings. This is below the threshold for which a transport statement or transport assessment are required. Full details are available in the link which they provided at the time of giving the comments. We would expect a light touch transport statement for 50 dwellings and a transport assessment undertaken at full capacity for 80 dwellings plus. They concluded by saying 29 dwellings would not have a severe impact on highway safety or capacity. Thank you.
Thank you.
Are there any other questions? Councillor Davenport-Ray.
Yes, I have a question about parking as well. In section 7.22, you're talking about the parking provision, and you mention balanced consideration should be given to the loss of garages, which the applicants have demonstrated are largely unused. Yet earlier in the report, 7.20, in this particular application, there are 6 garages and all 6 are in use. So do you come to that balanced conclusion in this application as well, even though all of the garages are currently in use?
I think it was a consideration of the cumulative impacts of the development as a whole across the entire 14 sites. I think it comes back to the fact of the garages being under the ownership of the applicants, and so they are in control of those. So regardless of the outcome of these applications, it's within their gift to, following correct notice, to end tenancies as they wish, which would result in a similar displacement of vehicles onto the highway. So again, that's where the balance comes from. And that's something that the local planning authority is unable to control in that respect. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any other questions for our officer? In that case, we'll move on to the debate. Is there anyone that would like to start off the debate for us? Councillor Davenport-Ray.
Of all the applications in this series that have been put before us, I find this one the least palatable and the least difficult for me to balance with our need for social housing. The speaker who spoke to us, Mrs. Drennan, put a lot of those concerns together very succinctly at the end of her speech. Concerns of overlooking, concerns of loss of green space, which you can see when you're on the site where those will be lost, concern about cars accessing those spaces due to the location in the neighborhood, the number of extra spaces that have been included in this rather tight area. I understand from the applicant that they are to code, the size, but when I take all of those factors, including the overlooking and the loss of light, I cannot balance it against, in this particular application, against the need for social housing. But I'd like to hear the thoughts of my colleagues as well.
Thank you. Councillor McAdam.
I'd just like to point out that looking at the plans and where these parking spaces are, they're actually on a corner, and that strikes me as being in a more dangerous position. And this aspect I find very unappealing. Thank you.
Councillor Jordan.
Yeah, I think I have to agree. This has caused me quite some concerns, and the fact that I know that there's a school very close proximity, and I know that we should encourage parents, healthy lifestyles, to walk, not to use their cars. We know the reality is they're running late, children haven't put their shoes on, they're going to put them in the car and use it. But I have to say this time I do agree with Councillor Davenport that the balance was not for me in the right way. I found it very difficult. Yet again, I can't find a reason, a planning reason not to approve it. And I know I'm new to the committee, so I'm finding it quite hard to balance that up. I'd be interested to hear other people's thoughts.
Thank you, Councillor Jordan. Councillor Dew.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I think the issue on this one is, as has been pointed out, there are some things you can hang your hat on. Unfortunately, the support we need, which would be from the Highways Authority, is not there. They have no objections to any of this. So even though we feel we've got objections, if this was to go to appeal, the inspector would look towards the expert witnesses, which we're not, and the Highways Authority are, for their opinion on what this is. So as I say, unless we can come up with a reason, not that they're wrong, but in addition to what they've done, I can't see any way around it, because as I say, the Highways Authority are saying they do not see a problem, and they're the people who are charged with coming up with that expert opinion, which leads us to where Councillor Jordan finds herself firmly stuck. You know what you want to do and what you'd like to do, but we're working with the rules that we're working with, and they do not lead us anywhere else, unfortunately. I'll leave it there for now, but if you want to pose in due course, let me know.
Thank you. Any other comments? Councillor Butler.
Thank you, Chairman. Yeah, this is probably the most difficult one to judge, really. I understand, you know, as Doug says, we've got nothing to hang our hat on as far as refusal. Those three spaces that have been allocated to parking, really, I'd prefer if they weren't there, because I do see them as a danger, although there again, the highways don't, so they're the authority. But I'd prefer it if they weren't there. I'm a little bit concerned about the overlooking. I wouldn't imagine there's a great loss of light, but there is an overlooking situation there. But as always, I don't think there's much we can do about it. So if you're accepting Councillor Dew's recommendation to approve, I'll second it.
Thank you. Are there any other comments? Councillor McAdam.
Just a point that I know as being a relatively new member of this is that when we get the reports and it's for approval, every little facet is covered. And if we're always going to say, well, you know, there's nothing here to hang your hat on or something like that, then it's almost negating that we've actually got an opinion of our own. If I vote against, it's because I actually think they've got it wrong in areas. And I don't think we should assume that they always get it right just because it's in the report. Thank you.
Any other? Councillor Jewson? Oh, sorry, Gogson. Sorry.
Seem to have difficulty with my name at times. So difficulty with me, but not necessarily the name. No, picking up on the point Councillor McAdam was saying, we don't always follow the line of what the officers do. The officers do go to great lengths, but it is within our gift, if we are against something, to look through the plan and be confident that we've got something that we can hang a hat on firmly to reject this. And yes, we have gone along and we've been successful in some of these when we've rejected, but it does mean that you've got to know what's in the plan so that you can confidently put something. And to my, I found I had to help write the report that goes to the inspector when we do go against the inspector, against the officers, and it does then come and help us later on. But the officers, I will say, quite often get it right, but sometimes we can challenge that, and sometimes we're right, sometimes we're wrong.
Thank you. I'd like Councillor Niche.
Sorry, it's just to carry on from that one. Having to go to one next week, I shall see how that goes. But it proves a point that quite often, not quite often, on occasions, with the right policy behind it, it's the reasons as to why we're refusing it or going against officer decisions. That's why we do go that route. And it is all down to balance on all of these. And I think looking at all the policies and all, you have to look at all the balances, because there's always harm. There's always things that are good, there's always things that are bad against it, and we have to balance that, and even more so when you're looking at affordable housing as well, because obviously it's a greater balance that you have to weigh against it. So yeah, I do with fruit, and it's an interesting one because obviously you haven't been on shortly, but we do quite often, on occasions go against, and yes, it is. We do have to work quite hard for that one, and as I shall find out next week.
Thank you. I'd like to invite Head of Planning, Ms Kerr, to make a comment. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. And perhaps it is building on where the conversation had started to go. Essentially, officers, we are planners by trade. We do prepare the reports for you to consider, but you are the decision makers. However, we are legally obliged to have reasons for our decision, whether that be for or against. And of course, planning decisions need to be made in accordance with the Town and Country Planning Act, which says that developments must accord with your development plan unless material considerations indicate otherwise. So with that in mind, it's just a reminder of that position as the local planning authority, that we are reminded that we do need to be able to defend our decision, whether it be for or against, and have full regard to the local plan 2036. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any more comments to add to this debate? No. So, Councillor Dew, can I accept your proposal? Thank you. And seconded by Councillor Butler. So all those that approve this particular application, can you raise your hand?
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8.
And those against?
1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
And any abstentions? Therefore, that has been approved. We will move on to the next item on the agenda, which is 4N or 2E on the new agenda. And I will introduce Kevin Simpson, our planning officer, to report to us. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chair. So this site relates to the demolition of 8 garages, of which 1 is rented locally, 1 from outside the area, and 6 are void, and the erection of 3 two-bedroom dwellings with 2 spaces per dwelling and 3 allocated and 2 visitor spaces. So that shows the location of the site there off Springbrook, the main location plan, and the garage is within the red line. And the next slide, please. So that's a general overview of the garages. So the top left-hand photo shows the view eastwards from within the garage blocks, looking out towards the Springbrook flats. And then the wider street scene view, again showing the flats. And then below, the northeast view into the garage court with the side elevation of number 45 Springbrook visible, there to the left of the photo. And then a wider view into the garage court showing the rear of the Springbrook properties to the southwest. Next slide, please. So this is a general overview of the arrangement of the plot. So you can see that you've got the 3 dwellings there, the terrace dwellings. You've got spaces for 2 of them to the front there. And then the remaining spaces for the extra property is in that area there, along with the allocated and visitor spaces. Next slide, please. And that shows a general overview of the arrangement of the dwellings. So the front and elevations, rear and side, and also the general layout from the floor plans first and ground floor. Thank you.
Thank you. There are no speakers for this particular application, so we will move on to questions of clarification for our officer. Are there any questions? Councillor Davenport-Ray.
On the plan, can you show us which areas are currently green space that will now be no longer green space?
Just wait for my colleague to get the plan back up there. Excuse me. So if you can go to the photographs, Julie, please. I think there is very little green space to speak of in that area, as you can see. That's the entrance into the garage courts from the direction of Mallard Lane. So there's quite a large degree of hard standing there. To the left of the picture, you can see. I don't believe that the verge is affected. I think there was going to be some storage for bins allocated there. But again, it's not something that would be defined as public open space. So if there was a minimal loss of green space, for example, an estate verge, as you would find throughout estates such as this, the loss of that would be mitigated by the provision of the soft landscaping that has been recommended by Urban Design and which would be conditioned as part of any approval. Thank you.
Are there any other questions of clarification for the officer?
Sorry, I can't see. Where are the parking spaces? Could you just point out where they are? Sorry.
Okay, so yeah, so those are the dwellings there you can see in the centre, and then to the front you've got the 2 spaces per dwelling, if you like, for 2 of the dwellings. So you've got the 4 there, and then to the left of the dwellings you've got the extra spaces for the house that's proposed, the 2 extra spaces, and then the remaining allocated and visitor spaces there.
Thank you. Are there any other questions? In that case, we'll move along to the debate. Who would like to start the discussion? Councillor Corney.
Thank you. As we've gone through all of these, some are probably sit easier than others, and for me, this is one of the ones that sits a little bit better than some, like the previous one. So yeah, I actually think it sits well on the plot. I can't see, again, I can't see anything to jump out to sort of say no to this, but I'm happy to propose when we get there, but I think I'll hold back until we hear a bit more of the debate. Thank you.
Anybody else that would like to contribute to the discussion? Councillor Niche.
Thank you, Chair. And again, I agree with Councillor Corney there. Used to be Convoy, but it's Corney now. That there isn't much that's getting removed from a balance on this perspective. So I'm happy to second looking at it. I think it's an improvement on what's there. It's giving some parking space. There will be some additional greenery, and what was green, which was probably parked on anyway, is going to be reconfigured. So I'm happy to second that if you're proposing it.
Thank you. Is there anyone else that would like to contribute to the discussion before we move on? Councillor Butler.
Thank you, Chairman. Yeah, this is another one that I'm not over happy with. With regards to the parking spaces that come off the road, which is not far from the bend again, but you know, same old story really. Highways don't see a problem there, so why should I? But I just don't like this idea of parking or manoeuvring off the road near a bend. So, but hey ho, you know, we are where we are, and I shall support it. But it's just a comment I'd like to make. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any other comments?
I'd just like to second that. I agree about the dangers of being on a bend, and I also feel that the same way on that. But obviously, it is as it is with the application. So,
Thank you. In that case, we will go to a vote, and we will take Councillor Corney's proposal and Councillor Niche's seconding that proposal. All those who approve this particular application, can you please raise your hand?
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10.
And anybody against?
1, 2, 3.
And any abstentions? Therefore, that is approved. Now we move on to item 5 on our agenda, which is the appeal decisions. And our planning service manager will bring that to us. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. There were 6 appeal decisions since we last met. 5 were dismissed, 1 was allowed on appeal. That was a DMC committee application with a recommendation from officers that we were going to. It's regarding the actual development framework. So an inspector took a different view, but we can pick that up through general training.
Thank you very much. So that brings us to the end of our meeting. Councillor Niche.
We need to go on for a bit longer. No. It was just, I must admit, I had a quick relook at that Blunchiston one, and I was a bit concerned because that was a countryside one, wasn't it? Open countryside. And I'm quite surprised at the decision on that one, which I think we should move on. And just before you do close, may I just thank Kevin for the Kevin Simpson show, both last week and this week. It's kept us all on brief. Thank you very much, because I think it was eluded very carefully and consistently throughout all of those, and was knew his stuff, should I say. And thank you very much.
Yep. Thank you very much. Okay, so that brings our meeting to a close. Thank you very much.